Welcome to Spectrum Perspectives, real talk with parents, professionals, and autism advocates, with your host, Cindy Gellermini.
Hi, everyone. This is Cindy with another episode of Spectrum Perspectives. So as you know, if you've been listening to my podcast, I'm the author of the children's book series, Robbie's World and His Spectrum of Adventures. It's 3 books about a little penguin with autism. And as I wrote these stories about my son when he was a little boy, I realized the potential that they had to teach children and adults about autism. And one of the things that I really wanted to see happen was teachers read this to their students. And since autistic kids are now included in public schools now, they're not kept alone in separate schools as much as they used to be. There's a really good chance that students are going to come across other kids in their school that have autism, and they're not going to understand these children because they're not being taught what autism is. And the teachers need to know more about what autism it is as well. So one of the thoughts that I had was, if teachers read these books to their students, they'll fall in love with Robbie the penguin. And then when they see a fellow student in their class making noises, stimming, doing things that autistic kids do, instead of saying, oh, he's so weird, instead they'll say, oh, okay, I get it. He's just like Robbie the penguin. And in my mind, I thought this will cut down on instances of bullying. Now, when the books were released in April, couple months ahead of time, I started joining Facebook pages for autism, and I started to see what was going on these pages, and certain subjects that you're not allowed to touch, you're not allowed to bring up because it starts arguments. What kind of arguments? Then I started to learn that adults with high functioning autism were butting heads with moms of autistic kids. And the fighting has become so bad, it's like the Hatfields and the McCoys, or the Democrats versus the Republicans. They are butting heads. Then I started following the Autism Cafe and following Eileen Lamb, and I started to see that she's being bullied by these adults with autism are bullying her as an autism mom and telling her that she's abusing her children and saying all these mean, horrible things to her. But the ironic thing is that Eileen's not only the mom of an autistic kid, Eileen is an adult with autism herself. So they're attacking one of their own. And this attacking and bullying is really upsetting to me. I don't like it. Here I am trying to advocate for people with autism and trying to cut back on the bullying, come to find out that autistic people are being the bullies against other autistic people. And this just doesn't make sense. So I really wanted to bring Eileen on so that we could just talk about the subject. But I also just wanted to talk to her again as a mom and as a mom of an autistic kid, and just about her experience, just like all the other moms that I interview. I just wanted to get to know her a little bit as a person, get to know her perspective and her journey with this. So I think we had a really nice interview, and I hope you enjoy it. Hi, everybody. This is Cindy, and I'm here with another episode of Spectrum Perspectives. And today I have a very special guest. Eileen Lamb is here with us, and Eileen is, I think, well known in the autism community because you're a blogger and you have a podcast as well. The Autism Cafe is your blog, and you're on Instagram, Facebook. I don't know what else. Do you do YouTube videos?
Not YouTube, but Twitter, Pinterest, pretty much everywhere but YouTube.
Every social media. So yes, and I didn't officially say hello. I should say bonjour.
Bonjour. Thank you for having me.
So usually I interview moms about their kids with autism, but you are unique because you not only have a son with autism, but you have autism yourself, correct?
That's right.
And do you prefer if I say someone with autism or if I say you're autistic?
I don't care. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay. Okay, good. Because I don't know if you know about me, but I wrote a children's book series about a little penguin with autism based on my son. And I released it in April. So right around February, March, before the book was going to be released, I decided, let me join some of these Facebook pages, these autism pages on Facebook. And I was very surprised to see what was going on because I felt like I was out of the loop because my son was an adult, and I felt like I didn't really need to join, support groups on Facebook because I had already lived it, but I was really surprised to see what was happening. And that's around the time when I found your page and I saw what was going on, but we'll get to all that later. I want to ask you the same questions that I pretty much ask every mom about your son and your pregnancy. But since you also are diagnosed with autistic, I want to know about your life as well. So when were you diagnosed, as a child or as an adult?
I was 26, so I was an adult.
Oh, you were. So did you suspect it yourself and you looked into it? Like, how did that come about?
Yeah, well, my son was diagnosed first, Charlie. He was diagnosed with severe autism when he was 2. And so my family is in France. And I told my mom, obviously, about Charlie, and she refused to believe the diagnosis because she said I was the exact same way as Charlie as a child. And I was like, well, I mean, they're right. Charlie has autism, so maybe I'm on the spectrum too. And so I started looking into it. And at first it was just on internet, and I'm not going to diagnose myself with an internet test. So I went through a full therapeutic assessment, which is dozens of hours of tests and interviews with family members, cognitive tests. I mean, it is intense, it's and
who did you go to for that? Did you go to a neurologist or where do you
psychologist
go? Okay.
Psychologist who specializes in autism, and yeah, and I was diagnosed at the end of it, but I didn't know if that was gonna happen. I was open-minded that it could be any other diagnosis that kind of overlap with autism. That's why I wanted to see a professional, because I wanted to know, like, for sure, because could have been just like social phobia or SPD, or hell, she even saw schizophrenia at some point. She told me at the end, like, that was on the table. So yeah, that's why it was so important to get professionally diagnosed.
Yeah, it's interesting because I have a family member that was diagnosed with schizophrenia as an adult. And when I look at them now, I'm like, I don't know that that's what it is. I think, having a son with autism too, and, if it's genetic, I'm like, I think he may, have autism, but you don't know, but it hasn't been formally diagnosed. But that was a long time ago that he was diagnosed with that. And they weren't diagnosing people with autism back then.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What kind of questions did they ask you? Like, how do you see autism in yourself? But so you said socially.
Yeah, socially is the main thing for sure. That as an adult, at least, also a lot of anxiety around doing things that people just do so easily, like, going to the store. It's because of all the sensory overload and being around people. It's really hard, even if I'm not interacting with them. Just like if I'm going to the store and there are people around me, I don't like that. I mean, I know they're not gonna, but that type of things. Communication is difficult for me in my relationships. I couldn't keep a friendship as an adult or as a kid, for that matter. And yeah, I've always had different interests from kids my age and things like that. So it wasn't anything, I had a hard time growing up because I've always known I was different. But it wasn't to the point that it was so obvious that I got diagnosed, like my son, for instance. There's no way it could be missed because he's 8, he doesn't talk, But with high functioning autism, it's more subtle, and we learn ways to compensate. And that's why often it gets diagnosed in adulthood.
Yeah, and I've learned that it presents differently in girls than boys also, because you're the third woman that I'm interviewing that has autism, and they like to go off by themselves and read books rather than, interact with other people. And it just got missed because they just thought, well, they're just quiet and they like to read. And
exactly, yeah, the shy smart girl, and that's like, that was exactly it. I was shy and gifted. That was the only thing that people were saying back then about me,
Yeah, but you had no language delays, or you didn't have trouble learning in school or anything like that?
No, it was quite the opposite. But that's the thing with Asperger's, because my diagnosis technically is Asperger's, is that there is no language delay as a child. And that's the definition of the Asperger diagnosis. If there is a language delay, then it's not Asperger's.
Right. And you mentioned sensory when you go to the store. Like, do you have any kind of sensitivity to lights or sounds too loud or?
Yeah, sounds is definitely the worst of all. Like, I get startled so easily, and any sound just, it drives me nuts. I feel like angry when I hear sounds. It's not rational. I cannot handle it. And so when it's coming from all direction at the store, and I have to deal with the actual, having people around, and also knowing what to do, because, even the simple process of like checking out, to me, I need to think about it. There are so many steps, and it's not easy. It's not as easy as putting the things on the and paying. No, to me, it involves like thinking about it for so long. And so, yeah, it's so overwhelming. I can't do it. I'm thankful
Do
for
you
delivery.
hear, like, sometimes the fluorescent lights have a high pitch?
Yeah.
So do you hear that?
Yeah. I
Interesting.
don't know if it's the light, but I've noticed that too.
Yeah.
Or it's in places with the big lights on the
Yes.
on the ceilings. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
all right. So you didn't have autism first. So that you weren't thinking, oh, I'm autistic, so I might have a child that has autism. You found it after him. So let's talk about your pregnancy. Did you have a normal pregnancy? Were there any kind of signs that, that maybe something might go wrong with the baby or anything?
It was mostly normal. I did have intrauterine growth restriction, which means that around 36 weeks, 34, it stopped growing. So I was being monitored closely for that. But other than that, and anemia in the first trimester, it was pretty easy, I gotta say. So he was born with 6 fingers on his right hands.
Really?
On his right hand, yeah. So that was
on
also
just
like
one hand?
One hand. Yeah, one thumb like branching out. It was more of a double thumb. It was coming out of the. So that was also another like, okay, but no link with autism or anything. It was just.
What did they do? Did they do surgery to?
Yeah, when he was 18 months, they removed it with the surgery. It looks a little funny now, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. And then the birth was okay. He had no complications during the birth.
Yeah, all good.
And then how about his development? Did he crawl on time and walk on time and all that?
All the physical milestones, he reached them like on time or early. Honestly, like he walked at 10 months, which is pretty early. I mean, everything was fine. The speech he never really had. He did talk a little bit, but he was always behind. And he was also never pointed, which is a huge milestone that parents don't realize. But pointing, for joint attention, it's like showing people things you're interested in. He never did that. He just started now, and he's 8. So he missed a lot of milestones, just not the physical one.
Right. Okay. So when did you start to think that maybe, how did we end up at the diagnosis of autism? Like, what were the signs? What happened?
Well, at 15 months, we started getting worried because, we filled out this paperwork at the doctor office, and we saw that he was behind pretty much everywhere, like really behind. But, she was like, oh, he's young. Like, okay. And then around 18 months, a little before then, he started losing the words he had. He stopped talking. And that's when we're like, okay, like surely that cannot be normal. And I did the MChat online. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a 20 question test, and it tells you the risk for autism, basically. And I think a score above 3 means risk for autism. And Charlie scored 17 out of 20. And like, okay, yeah, we got to do something. So we called ECI, early childhood intervention here.
Okay.
For kids birth to 3.
And you're in Texas, correct?
I'm in Texas, yeah.
Yeah, just because as I talk to people, different states have different
names,
organizations and things. Yeah.
I think it's called early intervention across the country, but it's early childhood intervention in Texas. But yeah, so they came to the house and they evaluated him.
Yes.
And he qualified for everything. Well, not PT because he was fine there, but OT and speech. And then there was another things like parent training sort of thing. But after a couple of months, he hadn't made any progress. It was just getting worse. It was like,
and this was at 18 months, you said?
Yeah, like 19, time for them to come out, 20. And it started like just, he spent his entire days lining up his little cars, his Hot Wheels. He wouldn't interact with us. He was just like in his world, but so intensely. And yeah, and ECI told us, I think like it's a bit out of our league at this point. You should see a developmental pediatrician.
Okay.
And we did, and he was diagnosed with autism.
How long did it take you to get in to see the developmental pediatrician? Did you have a long wait or no?
Well, here's the crazy thing. We did have a 6 months wait, but I kept calling, and one day there was a cancellation, and we were able to go like 3 days later.
Right.
That's if you're looking to get a diagnosis, or do that, because it's gonna happen. You just got to be really annoying and persistent.
Yeah, I was going to say that's good advice, because a lot of people have to wait a year at least,
Yeah.
So yeah, be persistent and keep calling. Yeah, that was good. Yeah. Okay. So then what? So now he says it's autism. So did he recommend ABA therapy?
Yeah, she recommended ABA 25 hours a week. So he was diagnosed at 22 months old. And we took some time. I didn't know anything about ABA. I didn't even know what that was. Started looking it up and being totally freaked out by what I was reading online, because I had no idea at the time. So
this was 6 years. He's 8, so this was 6 years ago.
Yeah, that was 6 years ago. He was, and so we just talked to people in places, and we visited therapy centers, and it was just kind of like 2 or 3 months process of trying to figure out if that was right, because everything we had read online, and ultimately everything we saw looked so nice, and we decided to follow the advice of the professionals instead of the people on the internet. So we did ABA. Yeah.
And it helped him?
Yeah, on a lot of levels. I mean, he still struggles, but they taught him to communicate with an app on his iPad, for instance, which was the biggest thing, was like the communication, and it helped decrease his frustration a lot. And they're helping him on independent.
How old was he when he started to use the iPad to communicate? Did that start right away, or was that as he got older?
He was 3. Before that, he was doing PECs, which he could use, but you could tell he was just like not into it. Like we really had to like force him to use it.
Okay.
And that's why we were like, I mean, it's communication. It has to be easy. He has to want it by himself. Yeah. So we switched to Proloquo.
Okay. So I just want to stop and just explain to people that don't know what we're talking about. PECS is PECS. It's a picture exchange communication system, where they just hand you a little, like a picture of a cup to request a drink, right? And then, but when you switch over to the iPad, you just mentioned the Proloquo. That's a program that the kids use to speak. Sometimes, as moms, we throw out all these terms, and people listening might not understand what all these things are. So I always stop everybody and explain to people that don't know. So, okay, so he did well with the Proloquo, I guess, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Does he so he understands you when you talk to him?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. He understands quite a bit, but he can only he can only communicate needs. So like, I want water.
Right.
And like, if you ask him, hey, are you hurt? What are you feeling? What's your favorite color? All of that, we don't know. Yeah. So it's really like limited. Yeah. It's amazing, but we need him to be able to communicate beyond those basic needs.
Yeah. It's very hard. Yeah. Because my son too, I could never understand really what he wanted, or, what was going on. I couldn't understand if he understood me or not. And it seemed to kind of go in and out, and he never learned how to use a facilitator, or, he never used the iPad. He never learned, there were any communication devices he couldn't use. So he was completely nonverbal. I just had to kind of read him, and just try to figure it out. So
how old was he?
He would be 31 now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Big kid.
So, so how old are you? Do you mind if I ask? Are you in your 30s?
I'm 31.
You're 31.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So he was born in 1989, right? And 1 in 10,000 kids had autism back then. You didn't really hear about it very often, and there was no internet. So if you had been diagnosed when you were little, your mom would have been in the same boat as me, where you can't Google, there were no blogs to read or anything. You couldn't read about ABA. We didn't know anything. We were clueless. We didn't know anything. So yeah, now it's a lot more common. Pediatricians were not looking for it back then either. So yeah, so things have changed a lot.
Well, even now, I feel like pediatricians are really not knowledgeable about autism.
Right.
The pediatrician, the regular pediatrician told us there is no way he's autistic. So he has autism, so don't worry about him not meeting his milestones.
Interesting.
I think because he was like smiling and at the appointment or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, like he's 8 and still nonverbal. So
right.
It's like
yeah. But did they give you the checklist though when you go for your checkups though? Weren't there questions that had to do with that?
Yeah, but she was like, it doesn't really matter at this point.
Yeah.
We don't worry about them until like after 3 or something. I'm so glad I somehow found the right people, to guide me through that developmental pediatrician evaluation.
Yeah. So that's why I like to interview moms and hear everybody's story and your perspective on everything, because if there's other moms that have these thoughts themselves, they can listen to other moms' stories, and say, I don't know, it sounds a lot like my son, and I ask, who did you go to? What type of people did you see? So that they know what to do, and they know where to go next. So, all right. So he was only 2 when he got the diagnosis. So what happened when it was time to go to school? Did he go to a special ed or anything?
He did 1 year in a special ed classroom. It's called PPCD in Texas. And
this was when he was how old? 3 or 5?
3. Yeah, 3.
Okay, 3. Mm-hmm.
But we stopped. He was making a lot more progress when he was doing a one-on-one ABA full-time rather than going to school. And he hasn't gone to school since then, but he's starting on Tuesday actually for the first time. So public school, we don't know what it's gonna be like. He's supposed to get evaluated so they can give him an IEP and all of that. That has not happened yet, so they're gonna kind of wing it until he's evaluated, and he might have to be transferred to a school. We don't know, so I'm just so clueless about it right now.
Okay. Oh, so you have no idea what it's going to be like when he goes to school. Yeah. So you've been homeschooling him then, I guess, sort of. Do you have therapists that come to the house still doing ABA, or no, or you just do everything yourself?
Well, Charlie goes to the center still, 30 hours a week. And
okay. For where the ABA is, he goes to a center. They don't come to the house.
Well, they used to, but with the pandemic, just kind of keep everything at the center now. But they could come to the house. Yeah, we choose, which is really nice. And I think a mix of both is actually nice. So the kids the skills can generalize from the house to the center to the house.
So what's his favorite things to do? What does he like?
He likes dumping things.
Dumping.
Yeah, breaking things, watching them break. I mean, it's just sensory. It's just like he's experimenting with everything. He likes making messes. Like you give him flour and he loves that. It's all about sensory stuff.
I've seen the pictures.
Yeah. Anything that's messy.
Does he like water?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He loves it.
Yeah, because that's very common. That how about you? Do you like water?
I do, but nothing.
You don't get any special sensory delight out of it.
No.
Because a mom on one of the pages, her kid was just diagnosed, and she was asking, why does my kid have this fascination with water, and he wants to take showers all the time and stuff. And I just said it's sensory and it calms him down. For my son, if he was having a bad day, we stick him in the shower and that would calm him down.
Yeah, I take a bath every day actually, which is kind of weird. I've realized by talking with people that they don't do that every day. I do. Sorry for the waste of water, but it's just something that's true. It's very soothing. But I wouldn't go and play with water at the sink like Charlie does.
Right. Yeah, but you're not a child anymore either, though. So
True.
yeah, I don't know if you grow out of certain things as you get older or what. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
some
know.
people do.
But I like to talk to adults too, just to try to understand like what you're feeling, what you're sensing, you know, what's going on on the inside. You know, since my son couldn't tell me anything, you know, I don't know. So
It's sad. Yeah, it's one of the hardest thing I think with Charlie's autism is not knowing what he's thinking, what he wants, what his needs are. Like
right.
always wondering if I don't know, I'm doing it right, I guess.
Yeah. Does he throw tantrums?
Yeah, and that's frustrating because it happens because we don't understand him.
Right.
But I mean, we don't understand what he needs or wants, and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the tantrums are, you know, natural because he's trying to communicate something, but sometimes it just seems like you don't even know why they're throwing a tantrum. It's not because they were trying to tell you something. It's just, you just don't know what's going on. Does he ever laugh for no apparent reason?
Yes. Yes, he gets completely, we call it manic, and he just like starts laughing and for a long time, and it's crazy. You don't know.
Yeah, because that came up recently too, where that was a discussion that started, and we used to always just say, oh, well, he's playing with his angels. It's like he could see somebody invisible in his room that was making him laugh, you know, and he was laughing.
Sweet.
And that got into a whole conversation with some other moms that are on some of my other podcast interviews that are pretty interesting, where the kids literally see angels. So it's pretty crazy. Yeah. So it makes you think of things really in a different way. Then you realize I really have no idea what's going on inside this kid's head.
Yeah.
I really don't know what they're seeing or thinking or feeling. It's kind of crazy. That's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed listening and it helped you gain a new perspective. To see the video version of the show, go to our YouTube channel, Robbie and Me, Autism Reality. If you're interested in buying our book series, Robbie's World and His Spectrum of Adventures, the link will be in our episode description, as well as my Instagram and Facebook pages. If you enjoyed the show and you'd like more content, please be sure to hit that like button, follow us, and don't forget to leave us a great review. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to join us again on our next episode of Spectrum Perspectives.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of today's episode. Be sure to join us again next time to hear the second half of the interview on Spectrum Perspectives.